long way about getting into ceramics. In undergrad school, I took a few courses that I thought would be easy. And I was a social work major, and I took a few courses in ceramics and printmaking. And ceramics turned out to be the hardest course I've ever taken. And I'm kind of stubborn, and if something seems tough, I'll keep pursuing at it. See, I've always worked with my hands. I've always built things. I was a brick mason for a long time, working my way through college, and so I thought, well, I'll work with my hands. But then it was the dexterity. It was kind of, and for years I wouldn't even touch the potter's wheel, and I would just hand build, and I was intimidated by it. And but that whole thing, that whole tension with it, drove me to pursue it even more. I taught myself how to make pots on the wheel, not for function, but to make sculpture. And it was a quick way for me to do it. And so, but I knew how to throw pots, but wasn't really in love with them. And I knew of folk art because I had a good friend of mine, Randy Bolton, who was a professor at the University of Delaware, who now teaches at Cranbrook Academy of Art. And he collected a lot of Howard Finster pieces and R.A. Miller pieces and things like that. So I collected a lot of pieces. At one point I had like maybe 90 R.A. Miller pieces because I lived, when I moved to Georgia, I lived in the neighborhood that he lived in. So I didn't know too much about the face jugs. I knew about the folk art, wood carvings, and things like that, William Dawson, things like that. So I was really intrigued by it, by the simplicity of it. And so when it came time, I was looking for a job. I had a couple of interviews, didn't get the jobs. So I looked, believe it or not, in an old Ceramics Monthly publication, and they had a job for a production potter. And it was in Gillsville, Georgia. Oh my God, yeah. And I was like, where's Gillsville? So I looked up on the map. I'm like, wow, it's near the mountains. I'll take a chance. And then so I called up, and the owner of the pottery, his son Chester Yule, said, you have to come down and try out. So he said, can you be here tomorrow? And he said, and make it 7 a.m. So I called my friend Randy, and we got in his Saab convertible and drove to Georgia through the night and got to there in the morning. So I tried out, and I had gone through, I have a BA, an MA, an MFA. I thought I knew everything. And I get on the wheel, and the wheel is a stand-up wheel like this one here, and I throw a piece of clay down, which was like mush, and I'm used to really stiff clay. And I go to center a piece of clay, and it flies off and hits him in the chest. So looking at me saying, well, try it again. So I take another piece of clay. Now I'm a little nervous, and I center it, and he said, make flower pots. So I'm making flower pots, and we had these lifters, which were, I'm gonna grab one, that we actually made from little pliers hinges, and we cut the steel out that we would lift the pots off and place them down on a rack behind us. And
did they have things like that in art school?
And no, it was just so odd, and I never saw this before. And so he's talking to me, I'm doing it, and I had like 7 flower pots. I was impressed, and they were totally all different. And so I may have made pots for about maybe 2 hours, and then he stopped me, and he's like, well, he goes, boy, and if you know Chester, he said, boy, he said, if you're willing, I can learn you how to make pots, but you have to forget all the stuff you learned in college. So, I'm 24 years old. I'm like, sure, I'm gonna do this. And so I had a job. So now I had to find a place to live. So we're driving around this small town of Gillsville, which is about maybe 150 people in population. And And so I go into the general store, the gas station, the beauty parlor, the barber shop, all in one kind of place. And so I start to ask for a place to rent, and now let's back up just a little bit. I had long hair in a ponytail down to my waist and a big beard, and so they're looking at me like kind of strange, and they're like, well, there's no places for miles around. So we go down to the next town, which is Maysville, and no places. So I got frustrated. I went back to Gillsville, and I said, well, I start work next week for Chester Ewell. And they're like, well, why didn't you say so? There's a place for rent down the road. So that's how I got a place to rent. And so I moved down and started work the following week. And I remember, I guess for the first 5 or 6 months, I wasn't allowed to do anything creative. I had to do what they told me to do, and you know, the way it was taught, you know, a big pot in college was maybe 6-8 inches tall, you know, and here I'm starting out with pots that are this size here, which we consider the 1 gallon, and you know, then you would turn pots as big as maybe 10 or 15 gallon pots, which. And
they were doing those strawberry pots.
And the strawberry pot, we were doing strawberry pots, we were doing all kinds of flower pots and things like that. And when we got an order, it was an order for, you know, not 100, but 10,000. And so you could be on the same pot for months. And we got paid piecework. And I remember making pots this size, 1 gallon, and I would get paid 11 cents a pot. And then it moved up to the larger pots, and I moved up as far as making 5-gallon pots, which were about 30 pounds of clay, about 18 inches tall.
And those are not easy to throw.
They're not easy, and they paid $1.80 a piece. And so I had to make a lot of pots.
But when you first showed up there, were they doing face jugs on the side?
They were, but they wouldn't let us do them. And what you know, so I was observing.
But you didn't go down there to make face jugs.
I didn't go down there to make face jugs. I really didn't know about face jugs. Right. So I went down there to make pottery. And when I got down there, I was really excited about that folk aspect of it. And I started to go to Linear Metters and talk with him when he was still alive. His nephew David Metters, his shop, which David took over. I actually made a few pots on Lanier's kick wheel, and he fired them in his groundhog kiln. But I was still at that point, I really don't know if I liked face jugs or not. They talked about them as a lot of the potters who did them, they were sort of more or less an end of the day piece. They would turn 300 to 600 pots in a day, and that would be their, you know, we're done, we have some extra clay.
We're gonna have some fun or something.
We're gonna have fun, we're gonna make this.
What was the market like at that point?
And the market at that point wasn't very, you know, I bought a lot of Chester's pieces and stuff for, you know, 25 bucks, you know, for a face jug. So it wasn't a big market. The market for them was in production gardenware, and but they did it. Chester rebuilt a groundhog kiln based on his, I guess his grandfather's design, and was firing. So that's when I took an interest in it. And it was after about a year and a half that Chester said, if you want to come out and help me fire. So I came out and was firing with Chester, and
that was the first time you were
exposed to a wood fire kiln, first time ever. And his friend B.R. Holcomb, who was the kiln burner at the time, and I had no idea. I was used to gas kilns, electric kilns, computers on the kilns, things like that. And so, you know, he introduced me to his firing. I'm firing, I'm watching, I'm looking, you know, learning about things. They did things by smell, by sight, things that I wasn't accustomed to. So yeah, I got introduced to it, introduced to the wood firing, and then you know, Chester, at the end of the day, I would make some pots, and mostly they weren't even face jugs. They were, you know, 1 gallon jugs and things like that, and we would inscribe poems or things into them, and he started to fire them for me. Because in the beginning, when I did the face jugs, Chester wouldn't fire the face jugs for me, so I had to fire them myself. I established a studio. A lot of my stuff was electric kiln fired, but I combined a lot of glazes and things. So I started making jugs, and I worked all day. I would turn maybe 2,000, 2,500 pounds of clay a day. It's very physical, and it's very sort of monotonous. Like I said, sometimes for a month you would be on the same shape. And literally, you know, I would make every 30 seconds a jug. And so it was like, I got home, you know, unwound. I had a little studio I built, and I would start to make fun things. And I really liked the face jugs. I started to collect face jugs at the same time. I started with collecting Chesters and Matthews, and then some of the Metters at this time. It was probably 5 years after I was there that I met the Fergusons and got...
Were they feuding at that point?
They were, oh yeah, they're always feuding. And even the Yule family were feuding as well. And I kind of got caught a couple times in between those feuds. You know, I was friends with all of them. And I would visit, you know, Todd at his pottery, and I would get in trouble for that at work because, you know, Todd was probably one of the best big gallon turners. He would turn 10-gallon pots and make it look easy. And the only other person that I think made it look easier was Harold, Chester's dad. You know, and 10-gallon pots, you know, 50 pounds of clay. And it's a lot of clay. This is about 8 pounds of clay. And I met Roger Corn maybe a dozen times. I have one of his pots. I think is turning, I almost relate it to Vernon Owens of Jugtown Pottery. Very, very slow, you know, almost perfect pots. Michael, when I started working there, was, I would say 16, 17 years old. He started out at the pottery sweeping floors. Dropped out of high school, was working right next to me, and he was one of the guys that actually, you know, at times when I felt like giving up, that he would keep me going. And he didn't start making face jugs probably till 1996, 97. So it was almost when I was leaving Georgia that he started, because he's like, I'm just that's just a job. It was like General Motors. It's just a job for me. And then he started to make pottery. I think once he got married and he saw that there was a viable income from making his own stuff. So I was, I started getting hooked at that point. And to me, I started to mimic what they were doing, and the style of face jug they were doing. And the clay that we used was very unique. You know, it was dug from the southern Georgia, from clay, from land that they had bought, and they had trucked up the clay. And so it had a lot of iron in it, had a lot of impurities in it. It was a really, after you got used to it, it was a really nice clay to turn. And so I started making a lot of face jugs, and still helping Chester out whenever I could fire his kiln, and whenever he let me. And then I finally built my own wood kiln there. So you know, so that's how I got started with doing the faces. And I kept going that way. And then all of a sudden I had you know, people who were going to the Slotin Folk Art Auction coming out, wholesalers buying my face jugs, saying, I'll buy all you can make. And at the time, And so, you know, and here I am, you know, I'm making a living as a potter, making about $14,000 a year. And so someone comes along and says, I'll buy every face jug you can make for $25 a piece. And I said, okay. And I would, and my studio was an old barn. I heated it with wood. I had a kick wheel, a treadle wheel. And I had to run out there in the middle of the night and stoke the wood so the clay wouldn't freeze overnight. And so that's how I started. It fueled my desire to do it. And what I tried to do was mimic more primitive jugs, the jugs that I liked. I liked some of Chester Hewell's early jugs. I liked some of the Medder's early jugs, the Toby jugs that the slaves made. I actually read a lot after I got interested and found out this migration of the face jug from the north and the south, and Pennsylvania was a big German influence with the face jugs. The south was the Edgefield district, and then they migrated into the northeast Georgia region. So I kind of did that because I was really interested at the time. Chester, a lot of the other local potteries like the Fergusons and the Medders, we invented this, we did this. And like the tobacco spit glaze has its origins in Asia. So there were a lot of that rivalry going on, and you tried to stay out of that. And it was what actually led me to move and leave, because of, you know, I wouldn't take sides. And I felt this loyalty to Chester, but yet I thought I could still do my own work, and I should still be able to associate with the Fergusons or the other Hewells. And when that didn't happen, that's when I decided to move to Pennsylvania. I took a job up here as a head potter at a salt glazed pottery in Oxford. So I kept doing face jugs, but what's changed? I think a lot of them thought, you know, like what a lot of when I went to a lot of the Slotin auctions and things like that, it was an investment. It was, they knew it was going to make money. But a lot of the people the collectors that originally started collecting my face jugs really loved this primitive look. It was different. And you know, a lot of times I got accused by Chester of jumping on the bandwagon, you know, and so I thought, you know, maybe I am. You know, yeah, and I think, you know, when I look at my collection and I think of the pots I collected and why I collect them, and I collected pots because I liked the way they looked, or I liked the stories that came with the pots. With a lot of today's you know, all the technology and everything, it's nice to go back in time and fire a kiln like they fired hundreds of years ago. And I fire the same way. I fire by the color, by the smell of the smoke. And what fascinates me and what intrigues me is the big difference I can get from one firing to the next. These accidents when pots fall together or pots split and crack. You know, I call them happy accidents. And that to me, you know, it's a very labor-intensive process, and I love it. And what I love about it is each person that does it, for you know, huge differences in reasons, get so many vast, you know, wide range of effects, and why they do it. And this is what, you know, with my book that I wrote, you know, about the wood-fire pottery, was all about that. Was about how I can fire in a groundhog style kiln, and someone else could, and get totally different effects for totally different reasons. And to me, that was really interesting, really intriguing. When I first fired with Chester, and I remember he took a coat hanger, and we went into the chimney of the kiln, and he put the coat hanger and he scratched the side of the pot. And he said he counted how many seconds it took for the glaze to heal over. And he said, well, when it heals over in 2 seconds, we're done. And I was used to, well, we had pyrometric cones which measured internal temperature, pyrometers and gauges and everything. And so for me to let go of that and get back to this, you know, in the early stages I took tons of notes. I stopped doing it on the advice of my wife because I was getting firings that looked the same every time. And she said, this is not why you're doing this. And, you know, and she said, you know how to fire the kiln, throw the notebook away and go on intuition. And that's what I do. And I look at the pots a lot more now. And there are certain pieces, like with some of these faces, I really like what I call like the juicy, runny, you know, wet ash look. When some more of the functional pots I don't like that as much. So I know positioning in the kiln. And then I start to dig my own clay. And a lot of this clay in these pots right here are that. And have a lot of high iron. So it gave really big dramatic effects with the iron, making green runs and things like that. So I really like that. And I use, and another thing, another influence with the blue glass for me, putting blue glass on it, was Mark Hewitt in North Carolina. I don't think Mark does any face jugs. He's a more traditional potter from England, moved here. But he did a lot of, you know, melted glass on this piece, and I thought, boy, I like that look. Chester did some of it too as well. One of the things, a major shift when I moved from Georgia to here, and I started figuring out my style. For a while, when I moved, I stopped doing faces, then I got back into them. And what I like about them now is their expressions. I'm not interested in, you know, in Georgia, a lot of times, like Matthew Ewell was trying to replicate someone else's face, or I don't care if the ear looks like an ear. I want it to look like an impression of the ear. But I'm interested in these expressions, and a lot of my faces as of late don't even have eyes. They have these little squinty things. They're kind of like, almost like if the person's drunk, or, you know, but I'm just, a lot of the things, someone asked me, why don't you make happy faces? Yeah, and I won't do them. I like, you know, a lot of them that I do. Sometimes like this piece here, you know, where it's just a pouting lip, just a lower lip, an illusion of an upper lip. So they're getting, some of them getting more abstract, you know. You know, how I place the eye movement sometimes makes it. I always used to put my handles equal to the back of the nose, is what they taught me. So now none of my handles are equal at the back of the nose. I don't want them symmetrical. Sometimes I put the handles almost as if they're looking at them. Yeah, off to the side, you know, faces that are tilted and, you know, kind of scrunched up. And, you know, to me, now what I'm doing is more like the, you know, the tradition of making an ugly jug, making a scary jug to scare the children away from the moonshine that was kept in them. Or it's almost therapy for me now. And, you know, my, you know, size to me is important. I think, you know, I do small faces, you know, to even mini pots, you know. But to me, my favorite size is probably, you know, about this size. You know, you hold it in your hand, it's closer to the size of a human head, you know. And to me, that's more challenging, to keep it in proportion, to do that. And I don't do many big faces because they lose that, you know, kind of feeling that I want. You know, I want someone to hold the jug rather than, you know, have it on the floor because they can't lift it. You know, I do a lot of mugs too, you know, and some people are like, hey, that's like how I look in the morning, or how I feel in the morning. So they can relate at some point some aspect of a feeling that they get from them. And that's what I'm trying to do, is some kind of feeling. At some point, everyone's felt like every one of these jugs. And that's what's interesting to me, that kind of relationship. That so it's more for me an intellectual level than it is for selling them. I do them now because, you know, I even started dating some, like you referenced to earlier, like Finster, like the time that I did them. And I don't do them to all, but, you know, I'll have what time in the morning, because I wanted to see if there was a correlation between if it was early or late at night, how I felt, if the jugs changed. You know, I don't know. I don't, yeah, I live for this. I don't sleep much. I come out here really early and I make pots. I would make them and put them out in my garden if I didn't sell them. I don't care. And that's how I do it. So what I'm trying to do now is push the expression into my faces as the art and doing things. Sometimes I'll even do like wall murals with all these faces in them and cut them into tiles. And so it kind of takes it away. But I still go back every time to the jug. I've made, you know, pictures and vases with faces on teapots. I always go back to the jug because it's that traditional form. And what attracted me to clay was potters who would make hundreds of pots a day. And I did it. It's not an easy living, and I appreciate the hard work that they do, and all these, you know, Southern potters, and you know, because I'm familiar with them, and you know, we worked long days, 5 in the morning till sometimes 6, 7 at night. I do about 3 to 4 firings a year, and my kiln's a lot smaller than it used to be. It holds about between 150 and 250 pots, depending on the size. I usually have another person fire with me, so they help me fire. But yeah, it takes a long time. So a lot of preparations, about 2.5 cords of wood, which is almost 3 pickup truck loads. And there are a lot. Like I'll go to a street fair and I'll see a lot of faces, but I don't know the people. I don't recognize them, and a lot of them are doing it because it's a popular fad, and they don't even know why they're doing them. And I did them originally because I turned 600 pots. I was tired of making the same pot, so I made a face, and it was kind of almost like going home and having a glass of wine. You unwound, and for a while I didn't make them. Now I'm making them again because I'm really interested in the expression and how people relate to them.